She may be known as one of the wonkier lawmakers in Seattle.
I think I could be one of these people that tries to contribute and tries to make a difference.
But for Council President Sally Clark, it's a title she relishes. Learn about Sally's eye for detail, her pathway to politics, and her current passions. Hello and welcome to Council Conversations. I'm Josephine Cheng. Today we're on the Skansonia Ferry on Lake Union with Council President Sally Clark. Welcome
Hello.
to the show. So glad that you're
Thank you.
making the time to join us.
Thanks for being outside.
You know, the Skansonia, this decommissioned ferry, is part of state history and part of your personal history as well. Did you work here?
I did. So towards the end of college, I went to the University of Washington. And towards the end of college, like a lot of people working their way through college bit by bit, I had a friend who was already working here, Teresa Howard, and Teresa one day said, "Hey, do you want to come work any shifts?" And I jumped at that. I had no experience working in a kitchen, no experience working behind a bar, no experience working service. And the Skansonia now, since it's been operated here on Lake Union, is a banquet facility essentially. You can do wedding receptions. People have come to birthdays, memorial services, different things.
And
so
you had to put on these
That was
events.
me. Yeah, I worked with part of a team. Yeah.
That was probably one of your less glamorous jobs. But then you went on, you worked at the UW Daily as a
Yes.
reporter. You've been a journalist. You worked for various local newspapers and then became editor of Seattle Gay News. How has journalism, or what skills has it given you, do you think, that you employ even now as a council member?
It's a great question, and I've thought about it a lot, because really my dream job would be to be back in journalism in some way. Like if I didn't have to worry too much about paying the bills or things like that, I'd do journalism. It's a fantastic mix of getting to talk with people about things you have no clue about, getting to learn about issues you probably have no business trying to learn about, and then trying to tell other people the most important parts of it, or what you think are the most important parts, so that they have information with which to make decisions about their lives, their day, their future. And that's a set of skills that I think has been constant for me as I've looked at other jobs. So whether it's been communications with nonprofits or at the council, I'm sure it's up to me to vote every week on a set of issues. It's also part of my job to try to tell people why I voted in that way, to do the research, to talk with people, and to try to explain where we are and where I think we're going.
Yeah. You mentioned nonprofits. You worked at Chicken Soup Brigade and for Lifelong AIDS Alliance, and then you also worked for the city in the Department of Neighborhoods and as an assistant to former council member Tina Podolowski.
You came close on the name there. That's very good.
How do you say it?
Podolowski.
Podolowski.
I had to, before I could get the job, I had to be able to do that.
That's
so,
right.
Yeah.
Were you sort of intentionally building a resume for public office, or did that sort of morph into, you deciding, oh, maybe I will run?
It really kind of morphed. I mean, there was, after a while, there was a little voice in me that said, I'm seeing how people do this. I'm seeing how some of these things operate and run, and I think I could be one of these people that tries to contribute and tries to make a difference by serving in these positions. I do think it's something that should be accessible to everybody. That's part of representative democracy, that we represent ourselves, and my turn is now, and I'm happy to be putting myself out there and to try to do the best job I can.
You applied for an open seat when Jim Compton left the position, and it was not an easy process. It sort of never is when 100 people apply for the job, right? Were you sort of surprised when, after several rounds of voting, the council chose you as the winner?
Yeah, honestly, I was. That was definitely a difficult, challenging experience, and there were so many smart, great people in that competition. People I had watched run for office previously, people I had worked with either in the city or outside the city, and I looked at the crop and I thought, God, there's definitely a crew of people here where if any one of them gets picked, I feel like we'll be really well represented. I was surprised and glad for the opportunity, and my philosophy at that point was, okay, it's time to put the surprise aside. I need to do the best job I possibly can for as long as I'm here. It's a great opportunity.
So you went into office in 2006, and you've called yourself a city geek,
Oh, yeah.
meaning that you love delving into the details of government policy. And I think that there's no better example of this than the massive and lengthy overhaul of the city land use code, which would put most people to sleep. But didn't you find
isn't that weird?
Did you find that not only important but fascinating?
Land use is really interesting. I had some advice from former Mayor Greg Nichols early on in my experience at City Council, which was, for God's sake, whatever you do, never chair the Land Use Committee. And
so what do you do?
he was half serious, half joking about that. It was advice that had been passed to him from other council members. But
you loved it.
I did, and the truth is, in Seattle, we have so many debates about what our city looks like, who can afford to live here, which neighborhoods are developing in the way we want them to, which neighborhoods are not developing in the way we want them to, how we connect transit between our neighborhoods. And all of these you can talk about, and you can try to push and pull on these things via the land use code. And I chaired the committee for 4 years, handed it over actually last year, at the beginning of last year. But it was the greatest experience and incredibly difficult. No perfect answer, and definitely leaving one side feeling okay and one side feeling really not happy. Never anybody who's ecstatic, but really good debates.
It turned out, not surprisingly to you, to have a really big impact on areas like, for example, South Lake Union, where the code now says if developers want to build taller buildings, they also have to include or put money into things like open spaces, childcare, affordable housing. Big impacts.
Yeah, and that's part of the debate we're having right now, is exactly how some of those things that we adopted when I was chair of the Land Use Committee will be put into play and put into reality in South Lake Union. So one of the things we did was adopt what's called an incentive zoning chapter in our code. Mm-hmm. Didn't necessarily apply it in places in the city, just created the chapter so that we could use it when we got to places like South Lake Union to say, okay, we know that development's coming here, we want it to come here, it's an urban center, and we have a public policy desire to have there be a mix of incomes who can afford to be here and contribute to it being a really great place.
And we're going to see that, I think.
That's my hope, yeah.
So now you chair the Economic Resiliency Committee, formerly called the Economic Development Committee. The recession is supposedly over.
That's what I hear, yeah.
We see some signs of that, cranes everywhere. Yeah. But what is the city doing to sort of make that real for families and for businesses?
Yeah, and that's been my big focus in taking over the committee, the Economic Resiliency Committee. We did play around with the name a little bit. We got tired of explaining to people that the recession was over. But we did want to talk about, there are cycles in our economy. There are cycles in people's lives as far as employment, unemployment. How do we help build systems and individuals and families and neighborhoods that are more resilient to these kinds of economic swings? So I'm working a lot on questions about how to get more people into job training, through job training, and into a place where they can actually obtain a job that will get them a living wage, help them improve their individual situation, but also the whole community that they live in. There are also some very wonky things, thank God, that we're working on related to tax policy, business and occupation tax, and doing some real changes. I don't want to tell people we're streamlining or making things simpler if we're not, but we're working with a group of other cities to actually make it easier for businesses to do what they need to do very quickly and to save time filing their business and occupation taxes. And so
does that include
that sounds sleepy, but
in city departments and
yeah,
things?
it means a little bit of truing up how we decide what a business might actually owe, and being consistent with some of those definitions where we might have been a little loose in the past. And it also means working with partner cities. So if you're a business person who has a business in Seattle and in Kent and in Tacoma, why do you have to go to all three of those cities' websites or use paper forms in some of those cities? There ought to be one place you go. And so we've got 5 cities that are collaborating on this project right now, and it will be incredibly meaningful for people who have to pay business and occupation tax.
You're also the first openly gay city council president. Do you think about, furthering gay rights, or what kind of legacy you want to leave as far as that's concerned?
I do. We are a very lucky city in which I'm serving on city council after a number of people have either used the city pulpit or other avenues to secure the rights and sort of equal footing that LGBT people would like to have in the city and in the society over a whole. We still have a little ways to go. We saw a great leap forward in terms of marriage equality, fantastic. There are some things that that I'm looking at and that a number of people have talked to me about in terms of employment access for transgender people. We've got some other things in terms of health care for lesbians. There are some things that are challenging in terms of how people access care, finding doctors who are culturally competent. And also there are just some changes in terms of different types of cancer, different illnesses that we still need to study more in terms of understanding them.
Council president also means that you're sort of the main liaison between the council and the mayor. How would you characterize the relationship between Mayor McGinn and the council right now?
It is up and down. You know, it's no secret. It's out there. It's rocky from time to time. There are a lot of things that we do collaborate on. Right now, Mayor McGinn and I have been collaborating on getting the first Economic Development Commission for the city established and seated with a great panel of people. We've got a committee meeting this afternoon, actually, putting half of those people before the committee for appointment. That's gone really well, and I really appreciate the partnership with him on that. And no secret, there have been other things where we've not agreed so well, and it's been a little tougher. I think, having seen a little bit of this, you know, I don't know if this is a great analogy, the grass is always greener. There have been times in Seattle's history where people have thought, oh my gosh, the mayor and the council get along too well.
Right,
we need to shake things up.
Yeah.
Oh my God, you know, there's no difference of opinion there. Well, right now you've got the other swing, the other side of the spectrum there, where we're not so worried about getting along too much.
And it seems like every council member eventually thinks about running for mayor himself, and you know, and several of them are. I know that you've considered it in the past, but not this time?
Not this time. Not this time. I'm pretty happy with the work that I'm doing right now, and I don't mean happy in terms of comfortable. I mean it's challenging. There's a lot to do in this economic resiliency world in terms of regional relations. The work that we're doing in Olympia right now, trying to secure transportation funding and education funding, and I really feel like that's where I'm wanting to focus my time now.
In just the few minutes we have left, I'm going to tick off some current city issues and have you give us quick, brief updates on them.
Speed dating. Okay.
Update on the Viaduct Tunnel.
Yeah.
What's going on?
Sure. So the tunnel boring machine is set to arrive here in Seattle in the late spring. Late spring, early summer, it will be prepped and lowered into the trench. And in the summer, that little guy, huge, enormous boring machine should start making its way under downtown.
How about the seawall, which is sort of connected to that project?
Thank you again to voters. Seawall, sort of connected. I mean, we need to coordinate the work. The voters said yes to a seawall levy this past fall, which was fantastic. So the design is moving forward, and over the next year to 2 years, people will start to see more work on the waterfront as we start to figure out exactly how that thing
and
gets
Soto
built.
Arena.
Soto Arena, that I'm as interested as anybody else as to whether there's a new team coming. Whether it goes in Soto is still a question. There are a lot of things that would have to happen. So that's certainly the proposal from Mr. Hansen. There's an environmental impact statement that will be carried out regarding impacts, and that'll look at least 3 different sites. And then I'm sure we'll keep reading in the headlines as to whether there is a basketball team headed this way or not.
Yes. And lastly, you know, the legalization of marijuana. How does that impact the city, or is that mostly a state thing?
In a couple of different ways. It means that more of us walk around the city smelling marijuana, which, depending on your feeling about that, is either great or a little intrusive in terms of personal space. Councilmember Licata and I have been working on zoning rules for medical marijuana dispensaries, and we're continuing to work on that. We'll see what the state does in terms of the rules.
Okay, it'll be interesting. Thank you so much for being on the show. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And if you're interested in finding out more about Councilmember Sally Clark, just go to our website at seattlechannel.org/council conversations. Thank you so much for joining us, and come back again next month for another edition of Council Conversations. Bye-bye.